Hey there, amazing people. You're looking fantastic today, and I'm so glad you're here. Get ready for a story of betrayal, survival, and the ultimate comeback. Imagine planning a dream anniversary trip, only to discover that your own husband and best friend are plotting to kill you. That's exactly what happened to Isabella Russo. But instead of becoming their victim, she turned the tables in the most spectacular way. This isn't just a tale of revenge, it's about intelligence, strategy, and proving that the biggest mistake anyone can make is underestimating the wrong person. Stay with me, this one's unforgettable. The Miami skyline shimmered under the late afternoon sun, the heat rising from the pavement as Isabella Russo locked up her office for the day. She should have been excited, after all. She and her husband, Daniel, were leaving for a luxurious 2-week yacht trip across the Caribbean. An anniversary celebration he had planned himself. But as she drove home along the coast, a nagging feeling settled in her chest. Something felt wrong. Daniel had always been charming, a financial advisor who thrived on persuasion and control. But lately, his behavior had shifted. He had taken a sudden interest in her life insurance policy, making offhand comments about her business and whether she had a plan in place, in case anything happened. Then there was Vanessa Hart, her best friend and business partner, whose visits had become more frequent, always at odd hours, always ending with hushed conversations between her and Daniel when Isabella entered the room. She had dismissed it at first. Vanessa had always been dramatic, but the way she smiled too much, touched Daniel's arm too often, and avoided Isabella's eyes told a different story. Still, Isabella tried to ignore her doubts. She had built her business from nothing, a thriving ecotourism and marine research company, dedicated to ocean conservation and deep-sea exploration. She had no reason to believe that the two people closest to her were plotting against her. The yacht, the Solaris, was breathtaking, pure white, sleek, and decked out with luxury beyond imagination. To us, Bella, and to the future, Daniel had toasted as they set sail, his hand warm against hers. The first few days were picture perfect, filled with romantic dinners, sunset walks on the deck, and laughter over shared memories. It was the kind of trip every couple dreams of. But by the third night, the feeling of unease returned. It was the way Daniel watched her drink too closely, the way Vanessa seemed to linger every time she poured Isabella's wine, the way the conversations between them would suddenly stop when she entered the room. And then, on the fourth night, Isabella noticed it, a faint residue on the rim of her glass. Barely visible but unmistakable. That's when she knew something was very, very wrong. The deck was eerily quiet as Isabella stepped out of the cabin, dressed in lightweight diving gear concealed under her loose clothing. Her heart pounded, but her expression was calm. She had one shot at this. Daniel was already waiting for her, standing by the railing, a picture of grieving devotion. The waves crashed softly below, the full moon casting a silver glow over the water. The perfect setting for a tragic accident. Couldn't sleep? He asked, slipping effortlessly into the role of the concerned husband. Isabella smiled, playing along. I just wanted to take in the night air with you. He wrapped an arm around her shoulders, guiding her toward the edge of the yacht. His grip was just a little too tight. It's beautiful, isn't it? He murmured, staring out at the endless ocean. The way the waves seemed to go on forever. She could feel it, the moment he tensed, preparing to shove her overboard. Timing was everything. Just as he made his move, Isabella twisted, using his own momentum against him. His hands slipped off her shoulders, and instead of a chaotic fall, she dove, controlled, precise, just like in training. The water was shockingly cold as it engulfed her, but she had no time to react. She exhaled slowly, sinking deeper beneath the surface. Above her, she could hear the faint sound of Daniel's footsteps scrambling along the deck. She waited, counted the seconds. Then, she surfaced, just enough to catch sight of Vanessa running toward Daniel. Did you see her? Vanessa hissed. Where is she? Daniel was staring at the waves, his hands gripping the railing so tightly his knuckles turned white. She's gone, he whispered. She's really gone. Not quite. Isabella took a deep breath and descended once more, disappearing into the darkness. Her air supply was hidden in a buoy she had secured earlier, just far enough from the yacht to avoid suspicion. She swam toward it, grateful for years of free diving training. Within minutes, she reached the buoy, securing the small waterproof bag that held her phone, emergency flashlight, and an alert device connected to the Coast Guard. She had everything she needed. Now, all she had to do was wait for Daniel and Vanessa to celebrate their victory. Wait for them to make the mistake of thinking they had truly won. In a few days, she would return, but first, she had to let them bury the woman they thought was dead. Isabella stayed hidden, watching from a distance as the Solaris sailed away, taking her betrayers with it. As soon as the yacht disappeared beyond the horizon, she activated her emergency beacon, alerting the Coast Guard. Within an hour, a patrol boat arrived, its searchlight scanning the water until it landed on her floating near the buoy. By the time she stepped onto dry land, soaked but very much alive, Detective Marco Alvarez was waiting for her at the dock, his expression a mix of disbelief and admiration. "I've seen a lot of things in my career," he said, handing her a warm towel. "But faking your own death to expose your husband's murder plot? That's a first." Isabella gave a small, tired smile. "Trust me, it wasn't my first choice." With the detective's help, Isabella laid out her plan. They needed solid evidence, more than just her survival. She had the recording of Daniel and Vanessa plotting her murder, but they needed to let them believe they had succeeded to catch them red-handed. And so, for the next 2 weeks, Isabella stayed out of sight, watching from the shadows as Daniel and Vanessa played the grieving husband and best friend. She followed their carefully staged public appearances, Daniel breaking down in fake sorrow, Vanessa holding his hand in support. They filed the missing persons report, gave tearful interviews, and waited just long enough before starting the process of claiming her life insurance payout. Meanwhile, Isabella gathered more evidence. The forensic team uncovered Daniel's financial records, exposing years of embezzlement from her business. Emails and phone logs revealed his affair with Vanessa and their long-term plan to eliminate her. But the final move had to be perfect. Isabella wanted to see the look on their faces when their world collapsed. That's when she came up with the ultimate trap, her own memorial service. The guest list was carefully curated, with investors, business associates, family, and even the media invited to witness Daniel's final performance. But he had no idea that his star attraction, the grieving widow, was about to take center stage. The memorial service was held at an exclusive waterfront venue in Miami. A grand event orchestrated by none other than Daniel Russo himself. It was the perfect stage for his final act, the devastated husband. Honoring the tragic loss of his beloved wife, Isabella, the venue was packed with family, friends, investors, and members of the press, all gathered to pay their respects. At the front, a massive portrait of Isabella was displayed, draped in white roses. Daniel stood at the podium, his voice breaking at all the right moments, his grief carefully rehearsed. "Isabella was my everything," he said, pausing to wipe a dry tear from his cheek. "Losing her was," he exhaled, shaking his head, "an unbearable tragedy." In the front row, Vanessa Hart sat with her head bowed, dabbing at her eyes with a silk handkerchief. Dressed in black, adorned with Isabella's stolen diamond bracelet, she played her part flawlessly. What they didn't know was that their performance was about to be interrupted. As Daniel launched into the final, dramatic lines of his eulogy, the doors swung open with a loud bang. Gasps filled the room, every head turned, and there she was, Isabella Russo, alive. She strode down the aisle with purpose, her gaze locked on the two people who had tried to erase her. Shock drained the color from Vanessa's face. She clutched the armrest of her chair, her knuckles white. Daniel froze mid-sentence, his fingers gripping the podium so tightly the wood creaked beneath his hands. "Please," Isabella said, her voice calm, but carrying through the stunned silence. "Don't stop on my account. I'm dying to hear how this story ends." The room erupted into chaos. Gasps, whispers, people shifting in their seats. Some guests looked ready to faint. Daniel stumbled back, his face pale as death. How is this possible?" Isabella tilted her head, feigning curiosity. "What? No heartfelt speech about how you did everything you could to save me? No plans to announce your engagement to Vanessa now that an appropriate amount of time has passed?" Vanessa tried to stand, but two uniformed officers moved forward, blocking her exit. Daniel swallowed hard, struggling to regain composure. This is some kind of mistake. Isabella, I have proof. Isabella pulled out her phone, connecting it to the venue's sound system. A moment later, their own voices filled the room, the recorded conversation of Daniel and Vanessa planning her murder. The damning words echoed through the hall. By the time they realize she's gone, we'll be celebrating. Vanessa gasped. Daniel went completely still, as the officers stepped forward with handcuffs. Isabella crossed her arms. Looks like the real funeral today, she said. As for your freedom. For a long moment, no one moved. The recording still echoed through the speakers, the damning words hanging in the air like a heavy storm cloud. Then, in a swift motion, the police officers closed in. Vanessa panicked first, jumping to her feet, her eyes darting around the room, searching for an escape that didn't exist. This is ridiculous, she shrieked, backing away as the officers advanced. Daniel, say something. But Daniel was frozen, his mind racing, his carefully crafted world collapsing around him. His hands gripped the podium, his knuckles white. This wasn't possible. Isabella was supposed to be dead. He had planned everything down to the last detail. How was she standing here? One of the officers, Detective Marco Alvarez, stepped forward. Daniel Russo, Vanessa Hart, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, insurance fraud, and embezzlement. Vanessa screamed, trying to push past the officers. But they were ready for her. Within seconds, her hands were pulled behind her back, the sharp click of handcuffs sealing her fate. Daniel, however, wasn't as quick to react. He tried to run. He bolted toward the side exit, his movements frantic, his mind too clouded with panic to think rationally. But as soon as he reached the door, his dress shoes slipped on the polished marble floor, sending him sprawling. The room collectively gasped as he hit the ground hard, the humiliation of the moment now forever attached to his name. An officer yanked him up roughly. Not so fast. Daniel twisted in their grip, his face twisted with rage. He looked at Isabella then, pure hatred burning in his eyes. You set me up. Isabella lifted her chin, meeting his gaze without a trace of fear. No, Daniel, you set yourself up the moment you thought I was weak. As the police led them away, Isabella noticed Vanessa was still wearing her diamond bracelet, a family heirloom she had assumed was locked in her safe. She held out her hand. I'll take that back. Vanessa hesitated, then, with trembling fingers, unclasped it and handed it over. Isabella turned the bracelet over in her palm, feeling its weight, the last thing Vanessa had stolen from her. But she had stolen something even greater back, her life, her freedom, and her future. A month later, the courtroom was packed, reporters lining the back rows, eager to witness the downfall of Daniel Russo and Vanessa Hart. The trial had become a media sensation, a failed murder plot, betrayal, stolen wealth, and an incredible survival story. Isabella sat in the front row, her presence a silent reminder that their perfect crime had unraveled before it could even begin. The prosecution wasted no time laying out the evidence. First, they played the audio recordings, letting the jury hear Daniel and Vanessa discuss how they would dispose of Isabella and spend her insurance money. Then came the forensic analysis, confirming the sedative residue found in Isabella's drinking glass. But the most damning evidence came from Daniel's own financial records, years of embezzlement, carefully hidden in offshore accounts, now exposed for the world to see. Vanessa, seeing the mountain of evidence against them, cracked first. She pleaded guilty in exchange for a reduced sentence, testifying against Daniel in open court. Her voice trembled as she described the plan, placing full blame on her former lover. Daniel, however, refused to go down quietly. He sat rigid in his chair, his face void of emotion, as his lawyer tried to argue that Isabella had set him up, that this was all a carefully staged revenge. But the jury didn't buy it. When the verdict was read, guilty on all charges, Daniel finally turned to face Isabella. His voice was hollow when he spoke. I never thought you'd figure it out. Isabella tilted her head slightly, her gaze unwavering. No, Daniel, you just never realized who you were dealing with. With that, the judge sentenced Daniel to 25 years in prison for attempted murder, fraud, and embezzlement. Vanessa received 8 years for her role in the conspiracy. As they were led away in handcuffs, Isabella let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. She had won, not just the trial, but her life back. The story of Isabella Russo is a powerful reminder that underestimating the wrong person can be the biggest mistake of all. Daniel and Vanessa believed that deception, greed, and betrayal would guarantee them wealth and power. They thought Isabella was trusting, naive, and easy to manipulate, but they failed to realize one crucial fact: she was stronger, smarter, and far more resilient than they ever imagined. This story teaches us that true power comes from intelligence, preparation, and patience. Instead of reacting impulsively, Isabella outmaneuvered her enemies, allowing them to expose themselves while she controlled the game from behind the scenes. She didn't seek revenge through violence; instead, she used evidence, strategy, and the law to ensure justice was served. It also highlights that betrayal can come from the people closest to us. But that does not mean we should be defined by their actions. Instead, we rebuild, we rise, and we become stronger. Isabella not only survived, she thrived, proving that those who scheme for personal gain will always fall when faced with true resilience and intelligence. In the end, success isn't about destroying your enemies, it's about proving you were always one step ahead.